Tyson versus Holyfield, twin turbo V6 versus supercharged V8, off-road versus mega off-road. Who you got in the battle of baller trucks? What's up guys, Justin with AT here with a fun little video for you today. You see, we still have our hands on this beautiful 2019 Roush F150 off-road SE sent over by our friends at Roush for us to get behind the wheel, have a little bit of fun, and shoot a review for you guys. And if you haven't checked that out yet, please feel free to do so here on our channel. Now, that led to a couple of interesting questions around the shop with some of my buddies. Would you take this in all of its supercharged glory for about 83,000 bucks? Or would you consider going with a modified Gen 2 Raptor for roughly the same amount of dough? So that's what we're gonna do here today. We're gonna walk around these trucks, kind of compare and contrast a few different key areas and ask you guys a question: which truck are you taking? So without further ado, what do you say we start with my favorite part of these things, the front end? Now, don't get me wrong guys, both of these front ends look rather tough, but if it's my money, I'm going Gen 2 Raptor all day, every day, and here's why. Now, this is a modded truck, right? There's no getting around that. Essentially, both of these things are, but between the grille with that big old full race ADD front mount peeking out behind it, the ADD Stealth Fighter bumper loaded with plenty of firepower from KC Highlights, and the winch, there's really nothing this truck can't do or any trouble it can't get itself out of. Now, aside from that, this thing, I think, is trying to draw a lot of the inspiration from the Raptor, right? You got the same kind of material going on with that honeycomb stuff. Obviously, the LED lights in the grille are very reminiscent of the factory Gen 2 Raptor, and they even implemented that with the amber lights on those front fender flares. But aside from that, guys, the hood on the Raptor is just super cool. You got the venting and that scoop. You got a lot of vinyl going on here, breaking up the factory hood a little bit, but overall, I think the clear victor up front is going to be the Gen 2 Raptor. Now, don't get me wrong, Roush has done a lot to improve the 2018 and 19 front ends, thanks to their grille treatment, the lower bumper here, which is all redesigned in-house, and that vinyl, but for me, I think there's just nothing more menacing on the road right now than that Gen 2 Raptor. The biggest factor up here though, up front guys, for me, for this kind of money, if you're spending 80 plus grand, the headlights, right? I mean, look at these things. They're just so tough. LED headlights, you got your really nice amber trim rings going around these things. You're getting a stock halogen headlight for 83 grand with the Roush truck. Now, that's not necessarily Roush's fault because they just take whatever truck you provide them with and add their goodies on top of it. But again, if we're talking truck for truck here, the Raptor headlights are probably one of the best on a truck period, let alone between these two trucks in this shop. But now, what do you say we break down the sides of the truck here? Because there's three key areas we plan on talking about here, namely the body or width of the truck, in addition to suspension, and then last but not least, your wheel and tire setup. First and foremost, the body, right? The Raptor. That's part of the reason why it just looks so tough on the road, is because of the extra width you are getting from the factory. And to me, that is just simply hard to beat even with a very sharp truck here like the Roush. Next up, suspension. Another area where it's kind of the clear victor goes to the Raptor, right? Because that's what that truck is all about. It's all about suspension, all about gnarly off-road performance from the factory, but now you factor in the aftermarket stuff from Swayaway, the big true 3.0 stuff up front with the resis, the piggybacks in the rear. I mean, that thing is just an animal off-road no matter what you throw at it. The Roush is no slouch in this department either, guys. Don't get me wrong, it does come with some really nice Roush by Fox 2.0 coilovers up front, matching shock in the rear, so you are getting a nice suspension setup compared to a factory truck. But I think if you're going for all-out off-road performance, the Raptor is gonna be for you, but the Roush is certainly no slouch here as well. Last but not least, let's break down the wheel and tire combo on each truck, and we'll even throw brakes into the mix as well. First and foremost, the Roush here, you're getting a 20-inch wheel, but with a 33-inch tall all-terrain tire. The Raptor, on the other hand, is kind of the opposite. You're getting a smaller wheel, a 17-inch black Rhino wheel, but with a whole lot more rubber, a 35 by 12.5-inch Nitto Trail Grappler. So really depends on what you like. Do you like the big wheel, small tire combo, or do you like a whole lot more sidewall that's on the Raptor? That's kind of a personal preference. Now, brakes, on the other hand, it is no contest. 83 grand on the Roush truck gets you stock F-150 brakes. That's right, kind of sad in my opinion My truck, on the other hand, the Raptor, has the nastiest brake setup I have ever felt on a truck, and that is the full setup from Alcon, which is just totally revamped that truck from a stopping perspective. I would put that truck against anything else on the road from a stopping perspective because the Alcon setup just transformed the truck so much and really is one of the best mods I've ever done to any vehicle, including that truck right there. So wheel and tire, again, personal preference. Suspension, well, kind of depends on what you plan on doing with the truck, and the brakes, well, again, it's hard to beat the Alcons that are on that Gen 2 truck. But let's head to the back of the truck now and talk about what's going on there. Out back, well, there's really not a ton to talk about out here that's completely different from one truck to another. Now, the applique, this is done up in vinyl on the Roush truck, whereas with the Raptor, it actually has the plastic applique with the Ford lettering going across. So similar looks, but very different style of execution. Outside of that, we have exhaust. Now, we're not gonna talk about the sound quite yet. We're gonna save that for a bit, but what we can talk about is how it is displayed. On the Raptor, you have two big old tips coming out from underneath that ADD bumper. Of course, the system in place, so you're getting even bigger PVD tips, 5 inches to be exact. Out back here, well, you have a stock bumper, but you do have a very, very cool exhaust from Roush exiting in the factory location right behind that rear passenger side tire. Now, the exhaust in this case, beside the sound, I would say probably get some points here from Roush because it is active, meaning you can change the sound of your exhaust from a cool little switch right by your shifter on the interior. Outside of that, they're both great systems as far as construction is concerned, both 304 grade stainless, just different looks and obviously much different sounds. So enough about that, let's hop in the interior and then we'll get to what everybody wants to hear about, the engines. All right, guys, let's get in and break down these two interiors, both of which are extremely nice, don't get me wrong, and they both get points in their own way. Now, again, this truck did start off life as an XLT, which typically would come with like that sport cloth interior. Well, this particular truck did get the $1,800 option to add the leather treatment on top of the 25 grand for the SC package. So really nice interior. The leather material is great. I really like the pattern. They throw in some kind of carbon fiber-like material in here, which does play nice with some of your other interior goodies in the standard truck. Seats are very comfortable, pretty much as comfortable as a factory leather seat, but I'd probably give points to Roush here because I just dig this style or pattern of seat more so than the black and gray in the Raptor, but at that point we're pretty much splitting hairs. One big thing I do really dig about my Raptor is the steering wheel. Now, the Roush is nice. You can tell they've recovered the steering wheel, but the Raptor steering wheels are so badass. You get that little red leather stripe up there, the thumb pads, the paddle shifters. It is a heated wheel. It's just really hard to beat. Now, one area I do think the Roush does very well is the gauge cluster here. They've totally gone through the cluster, changed the font, changed the design. The little reverse R is the R in Roush. Just little touches like that that do make it stand out and do make you appreciate the money you are spending on this truck. One little gripe there is the fact that you're getting kind of a smaller screen compared to that of the Raptor. You're getting the really big LED screen in that Raptor. This one, kind of smaller, not the end of the world. Now, if you happen to forget what truck you are actually in, well, don't worry, Roush has you covered there with not one, not two, not three, not four, but 10 different Roush letters or badges throughout the interior, including 4 on the seats, 2 on these really nice WeatherTech all-weather mats, and a couple of R's sprinkled throughout the interior, including on your active exhaust switch right here, which is something I mentioned in the rear of the truck. And again, really nice. I dig that they do this. Allows you to switch between touring, sport, off-road, and custom. And that's something you can actually get into an app on your iPhone or Android device, kind of tweak a few things and change your exhaust tone. So really cool that Roush adds that onto the package, and it is something that I wish the Raptor had. But now let's get into the meat and potatoes and the subject that I'm sure you guys want to talk about the most, and that is, of course, the engine. All right, gang, so we saved the juiciest topic for debate last here, and that is the difference in powertrains between these two $80,000+ trucks. Now, in this corner, you guys already know, right? That high output 3.5 liter EcoBoost V6 twin turbocharged, whereas in this corner, you're looking at that red-blooded American Coyote V8 topped off with a TVS 2650 supercharger from Roush. advertised, this thing's gonna make a whole bunch more power, right? 650 horsepower, 610 pound-feet of torque to the crank, whereas through the wheel horsepower and torque numbers through some dynos, we've seen these things make mid 500s or so at the tire in regards to horsepower, whereas torque is in the 490 range. This thing, as you may or may not remember, was tuned by ID Motorsports in the original build video, and it made somewhere in the ballpark of 430 horsepower and about 480 pound-feet of torque to the tire. So yes, obviously this thing makes a whole bunch more horsepower, about 100 give or take, but torque is almost breaking even on both here, which is nice because that's one good thing about the EcoBoost. These things are torque monsters and you really do feel it. However, there's one area where the V8 just simply stomps all over the Raptor, and that is exhaust. Now, if you remember, we talked about that Roush active system in addition to the Corsa on the EcoBoost truck. What do they sound like? Well, here you go. All right, so obviously no contest, right? And a lot of reasons why some Raptor owners, including myself, even though I hate to admit it, do at times suffer from a little bit of cylinder envy. Now, one thing that is cool is that outside of that traditional V8 rumble or V6 lack thereof, there is one cool thing between each truck that is different as well, and that is noises through the power adders. So the TVS here will give you that kind of iconic whine from a supercharger that is always fun to listen to, whereas the EcoBoost truck, at least now with that ADD intercooler, the blow-off valve is vented to atmosphere, you're making a whole bunch of cool turbo noises through that thing. So even if you're not a huge fan of the exhaust sounds on that truck, I do think some of the turbo noises that come along with it are very cool. But enough yapping about these beautifully expensive monsters. What do you say we get behind the wheel, starting with the Raptor, and see how they feel out on the road? All right, guys, so we're gonna kick things off here in my Raptor. I know I probably seem like I'm favoring the Raptor in this video quite a bit, and there's some truth to that. They are two entirely different trucks. The Raptor is just built better, essentially, from the factory than a standard F-150. And that's not Roush's fault, right? They essentially take whatever you give them and add their goodies and make it cooler, better, faster, whatever. But if we're just comparing a Raptor versus an F-150 and their shortcomings, well then, yeah, the Raptor is probably gonna be favored. That being said, I do wanna point out that if you dig a lot about the Raptor as far as styling, stance, just presence, but you also dig what Roush does, well, they do offer a Roush Raptor, and it is incredibly sick. So you're getting a new wheel and tire treatment, a very, very badass suspension on that setup with the Roush by Fox 3.0s, a unique exhaust, and also a chase rack here for the 2019 on that Roush Raptor. And truth be told, the Roush Raptor and the Roush F150 with the blower and all the trimmings works out to be right around the same price point. So it really just boils down to what you want. The Roush and the F150 are both the same truck inside the cab with the exception of minor tweaks. Now, this truck, the Raptor, has a much better sound system. It's got the sub, you got some good sound out of this thing. It's not great, it's not audiophile level, but compared to that Roush F150, it's night and day. And again, for the same price, I'd want to have something that sounds halfway decent like this. Ride quality of the Raptor, listen, I love it. The suspension, yeah, it's great off-road, we all know that, but it also offers a pretty unique ride on the road. It's firm, but at the same time, it does soak up bumps a little bit. I definitely wouldn't describe this thing as nimble, but it just feels like you could go into turns with a little bit more momentum and not feel like the truck is about to flip over. But on-road presence, listen, this thing really is unrivaled by any truck on the road. You know, some of the front end looks, things like that, but mainly the width. I mean, it just has this stance to it that just looks so menacing. But let's flip the script a little bit here and talk about one thing this thing doesn't have that the Roush definitely does, and that is the V8. That on-road presence of the Raptor, yeah, the soundtrack doesn't really line up with the appearance. I fully admit that. Sound is a very important ingredient to experience. Now that being said, you shouldn't be buying a truck simply based off of sound. I think a lot of guys just kind of write this thing off because of the cylinder count. Now granted, on paper, the Roush probably makes a little bit more horsepower, about 100 or so horsepower, I would say to the tire. Torque again is negligible. it is not a slouch, guys. It's healthy for what it is. So now that we just kind of harped on sound for a little bit, what do you say we hop in the truck with the much better soundtrack? Yeah, listen, the reality is, guys, there's no replacement for that V8 coming through the exhaust, right? And that's really gonna be the big factor here when comparing the two. I'm one of those guys that values performance over sound, but there's an attitude about a truck, or at least the sound of a truck, that the bark matches the bite. And that really is the case when we're talking about trucks. Interior-wise, yeah, it's nice, but they take what you deliver from Ford, in this case was an XLT 302A package. That's not Roush's fault per se that, you know, things aren't maybe as nice as a Lariat, Platinum, et cetera, but if we're comparing the two, price point to price point, I'm gonna go with the Raptor. I just feel it's a bit nicer appointed from the factory. However, one thing my Raptor can't do is that. Don't get me wrong, it's got a lot of torque, but it doesn't quite hit you as hard as this thing, especially while it's also hitting you with the exhaust note. That's an experience that is unrivaled. Ride quality wise, this is firmer, not in a bad way, but I kind of like the cushiness of the big 3.0s, soaking up stuff a little bit more. Now the brakes really aren't even close. This is still rocking stock F150 XLT brakes, while my Raptor has a brake kit on it that costs as much as most used cars. So it shouldn't really be a fair comparison, but that's the point of this video. We're comparing them as they are, modified. But at the end of the day, my Raptor has a lot of balls, very intimidating on the road, but it can't do this. Yeah, pick your poison, I guess. There's a lot I do love about my Raptor. However, there's some very major points I love about this Roush truck, namely the experience and the noise and the power. A little fun comparison between the two trucks, certainly not for the faint of heart when it comes to price tag, but again, something we thought we'd have a little bit of fun with. What are you digging most about each truck, man? Do you like the sound of this? I know you do. You don't have to answer that because that's a given. Do you like the appearance of the Raptor? Do you want to take the engine out of this, put it in the Raptor? I feel like that's probably going to be the popular vote. Either way, we want to hear from you. Drop us a comment in the comment section. Subscribe if you like our content here at American Trucks Ford. And remember, for all things F-150 and Roush and burnouts and all kinds of cool stuff, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.